Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, good to see you.
Wonderful to see you. Let's just give it another minute until we have all the speakers on this call. All right, there we have Newton, Frank, Jerry, and looks like people are still dialing in. This is actually very cool. I actually think this is like I see already a lot of friends on this call. I see already like Sergio, Christine, lot of other people on this call. So this is like quite amazing that we have the chance now to do this. All right, I think there might be still some more people dialing in, but I think we'll get going. Is that okay, Vlad?
Yeah, great.
All right. So I'm extremely excited that we have this opportunity during like this COVID time to do like an extremely international roundtable call. So I think like clearly was what Vlad, Wana, and the team is organizing was Techsylvania going digital and having the opportunity really like to have people from the United States, Taiwan, Romania, myself dialing in from Singapore. And I'm really, really excited that we have a few people that come from like very different entrepreneurial academia and all different backgrounds, and that are now doing their bit to fight COVID with like lots of different experience and hopefully with a lot of inspiration for all of us. So with that, I want to just hand off quickly for each of the panelists to give a quick introduction to themselves and share what they're doing in the context of COVID and what they've been doing before. So with that, I want to just hand it as a first panelist to Newton to say a few words. What have you been doing and how you're addressing COVID?
Thank you very much for this effort and putting together this wonderful group of people to discuss this critical situation. My name is Newton Howard. I am professor of computational neuroscience and neurosurgery at the University of Oxford. And in the context of the industrial part, I'm the chief scientist for an I2O, which works on brain-machine interfaces, deep brain stimulation, and advanced sensories. In this situation, we managed to find tools and the ability to actually do some rapid testing that is low cost and effectively more advanced than most of the available testing on the market.
Awesome. We'll definitely dig deeper into that, Newton. Very exciting and good to see you digitally after having you many, many times in Cluj. So I think it's very, very excited to see you on the other side of the world. Next, I'd like to have Jerry say a few words. And the one thing that I want to remember very fondly from his Techsylvania talk is that he has been like a very successful old school entrepreneur. When he talked about like reaching $1 billion, then it was not in valuation, but actually in revenue with his company, Riverbed. So that's like still the real billion that counts. So he has been extremely accomplished entrepreneur. So I'm very excited to hear, Jerry, what you're also doing in the context of COVID.
Yes, Philip, great to talk to you again. Yes, the $1 billion in revenue is the true unicorn, not the fake unicorn, based on momentum investing. So, you know, I started actually very classically in business in New York City, in Manhattan, as a chartered accountant. And then in my early 20s, moved to Silicon Valley and worked for Motorola, for HP, for Oracle. And then I did 3 startup companies, one with Tom Siebel called Gain Technology, one in the .com space called Ink2Me, which was a competitor to Google. And then finally Riverbed, where I was CEO for 16 years. So 2 years ago, I left Riverbed and went into semi-retirement, but joined the board of a securities company called Tenable Software. And I've been doing that and some, you know, personal investing. But this COVID thing has come along, and it's a big problem for the whole world. It's a huge problem. And so I still have a number of connections with other tech people and entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley. And so actually last week, we formed a new company. The name of it is Solos Health analytics, and our sole purpose in life is to help defeat the spread of COVID virus. And it's a very terrible virus because it's silent, it's deadly, very deadly, and it's hard to detect. And the only detection methods right now are through what I call biological tests, where they have to take a swab or blood. And those are very expensive. They take a long time. They're hard to administer to a large population. And you can take the test in the morning and be clear and catch the virus in the afternoon on the same day and maybe never be tested again. So it turns out technology does have some answers to a problem like this. And that is that there are health indications in your body, your temperature, which can indicate a fever, the oxygen level in your blood, which can indicate pneumonia, your pulse, your heart rate. And these things are monitorable by wearable technologies. And so we've started a company that will analyze the data from wearables, body temperature, oxygen level, and then provide a warning signal to the wearer and or his doctor and or his employer that perhaps he should be receive a biological test for COVID. And the beauty of this is that you can do it at scale. You can do it for millions of people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week over a large population for years at a very low cost. And it's not perfect because there are asymptomatic versions of COVID that give no indication at all. But it's better than nothing, and it may be a piece of a larger solution.
Sounds like your solution and Newton's solution align perfectly to bring like a holistic solution to the market. So sounds like there's like a lot of synergies what different people are tackling. But before we go into more details, I want to also have our last panelist say a few words. So our last panelist, Frank Meehan, is also an amazingly accomplished entrepreneur. And he has also the distinction that he has like a strong tie to Romania because he has also a developer team that he works with in Cluj. So he has also that unique connection to our local ecosystem. And he has the other unique distinction that he just lives in Singapore, a few hundred meters airline out of my window. But he is now relocated to Taiwan, and we had a little bit spat earlier which country is handling it better, Taiwan or Singapore. So that sounds like also an interesting discussion for later on, since we're in so many different geographies, which countries are dealing with it in a better way. But Frank, would you mind saying a few words about yourself and what you're doing in that context?
Certainly can. So I am, well, look, thanks for the intro, firstly. So I am now currently in Taiwan because we have a technology team in here in Taiwan. So I have a couple of things. So I am partner at Spark Labs. We have 240 investments across Asia. A number of those are involved in COVID fighting initiatives because we have a number of health-related startups that are involved in that. And then I'm also the co-founder of a company called Equilibrium. And Equilibrium is focused on the future. It is, we came together during the virus, and it's a team of scientists, engineers, developers, and founders, and we're focused on the future in terms of helping corporates reshape their supply chains for the future, which is a massive thing. So supply chains are obviously going to change very, very to an incredible way in the future in terms of clean, sustainable supply chains. And we're already seeing this heavily in China. The Chinese government, as you might imagine, is extremely focused on trying to make sure this doesn't happen again. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So with that, I want to take the discussion a little bit deeper. So to start off with, as some of you guys might have seen, Bill Gates has put out this amazing blog post where he basically said, like, he made like this very bold statement and claim and saying like, COVID is like a world war. The only difference is this time we're all fighting on the same side. So what I'd love to hear from you guys, what has been like, right? Like, I mean, some of you like Newton, Jerry, you guys have like, or Frank as well, but like you've been changing like quite radically what you've been doing before. So what has been your experience in COVID so far, and what has it like meant for you, and what has like motivated and driven you to like basically change direction in what you're doing? So maybe each of you can get a quick like perspective on that. And we can start with Jerry. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Jerry. So actually, as it turns out, my wife and I had actually flown to China in late January for a vacation before the COVID became publicized. So we landed in Hong Kong on January 20th, and for the first time started hearing about the virus, and everyone was wearing a mask. So we just stayed only 48 hours and then headed to Vietnam, Laos, and Bangkok to finish our holiday. By the time those 3 weeks of holiday were over, our return flight from China back to San Francisco had been canceled by the airlines, and COVID was in the news everywhere. And of course, you know, it affects mostly people over the age of 65, which includes myself and my wife. So we're not alarmists, but we wanted to be careful. So we managed to get down to Singapore and got a return flight to California from out of the Singapore airport. But we've been doing the sheltering in place. We wear masks when we go out in public, and we've even avoided seeing our own children and our neighbors. And now the fact that we're both semi-retired at this point means the fundamentals of our life haven't changed. We didn't lose our jobs. We haven't lost our income. We have a comfortable place to shelter at home. So we haven't been grossly affected, but we are used to traveling a lot, particularly by airplane. And I do have some business interests in other parts of the U.S., in Denver and in Texas. And I am very careful about going to visit them. And normally at this time of year we would be in Europe on holiday, but right now I'm actually speaking to you from a hotel room in San Diego, California, because we decided to take our holiday by automobile, where we're only exposed to each other, and not by airplane, where we spend 12 hours in a very small space with a lot of people whose health we don't understand. So I wouldn't say we've been affected dramatically, but we are being careful. It can be deadly. Even those who survive, can have permanent damage to body tissues, permanent damage to the lungs, permanent damage to the heart, circulation issues. And so it's a nasty, silent killer. And I think, the wearing of masks is important, not only to stop spread, but symbolically to just keep reminding all of us to, stay 6 feet or 2 meters away from each other, and just be careful from now on. And I am afraid the world will, particularly younger people will say, well, just, let the old people die and we're going to go out and have a party. I think that'll be a problem, because this is going to be around for a while. Number one. Number two, this is COVID-19. There could be, even if this is solved with a vaccine, there could be a COVID-20, a COVID-21, a COVID-22. So I think the world has to be on permanent alert for what may happen here in the future.
Yeah. So what has driven you to take action, right? Like, I think it's clear like how you've been affected, but what has driven you to like personally get involved in fighting it?
Well, we always, even in all my companies, we always took a bigger view of what our charter was. It wasn't simply to have the highest stock price and put the most money in our pockets. It was to serve the employees, serve the customers, and serve the community. And so that still is a driving factor in the way I think about life in the world. And it's important that it's not about. Unfortunately, the U.S. has taken a bad position that America has to be number one, which to me is absurd, stupid, and ridiculous. I think it's about the human race and the whole planet, and we all have to help each other.
That's a beautiful perspective. I'm fully aligned with that. All right, Newton, what was your motivation to change from doing brain implants to building COVID testing devices? You're muted.
We actually didn't have to change much. Unmute myself. There you go. We had to adjust some of the technology that senses in the synaptic vesicles and the synaptic gaps to basically sense in an open space viral load or an IgA, IgG, IgM proteins, and be able to discern from there the presence of antibodies or the presence of a virus. We noticed that our current device have the reactivity to this kind of light frequencies and light ranges of excitation. So retooling it wasn't such a big, difficult task. And it was the right thing to do in light of the crisis. I take a different view on Bill Gates's comments about this is a world war. And I take it as a view that the virus is an inhabitant of this planet, just like us, has been, and for not much longer time. We just came to learn to its existence and its lethality through its invasion to our body and its desire to use our body as a vessel for its existence. We have basic premises that could keep that virus out and could have been a no starter for the invitation for this virus to take that of great impact and great role in reshaping our life. Have we shaped our life in the first place ourselves? And notice our social distances or appropriate social space, or what is the appropriate etiquette and protocol for interacting with one another, and maintain that and maintain a lifestyle where we can actually prevent this type of microbial and viruses from invasion and all-out invasion on us. So our device is really a very simple spit test that is not a swab. It's not a blood serum with the complications that come with that. And it uses this refined technology that we have for the brain-machine interface to actually sense it. This is the actual prototype and the size of the kit. And this is where the viral load gets deposited in a spit sample. And essentially what we're doing is detecting the shedded protein on the outer circle of the actual viral shedding in proteins called IgA, IgM, and IgG. That would help us actually see the eruption of the early onset if the person actually had been infected, pre-signs before actually seeing the temperature and other indications and whatnot. I hope I covered. I give you a broad net so that you can ask very specific questions.
Yeah. No, I actually have, I have actually one very quick follow-up question before we'll go to Frank. You have a unique vantage point as a scientist. And I think COVID has brought one thing to us, is that now we suddenly see like every day scientists talking. Before that, there was a lot of like fake news and so on. So I want to ask you as a Oxford and MIT scientist, you're the perfect person to answer that. Is science sexy now again?
It's always been. It's always been. Knowing the intricate details of how the world works, essentially, and some of these objects in our existence or some of other living beings, it's quite a powerful thing. It's an important thing to have, and this virus presence pointed and showed us a lot of weakness in our system, in our living system, in our social system, in our psych system, in our education system. So in our education system, for example, all of a sudden, quite a few people realized that where was I when people were talking about the difference between bacteria and viruses? what did I miss in that class? And when was that class? Was it at the age of 9? Was it at the age of 15? So it's reestablishing things and reminding us of things that are just missed over the last century or so.
Yeah, much longer than that. I read a book about the fall of the Roman Empire due to viruses, right? Like in the plague and so on, right? Like, so I think this has been around for thousands of years. Just like in our lifetimes, we have never experienced it really like meaningfully. At least the ones who have not been like in Asia, that's been a bit around more. But anyway, Frank, so to round up this, since you have experienced this from Asia, this has given you like a unique vantage point. So can you share a little bit how has COVID been as a personal experience for you, and what has motivated you to get involved?
Well, I mean, we saw it on the ground here, right? So everything happened here so much faster than everything else. And I was actually going between Taiwan and Singapore in January, and Taiwan acted very fast, obviously, because as it's probably well known now around the world, Taiwan's handled this probably better than anyone else in the world. And that was mainly due to them going over to, they sent a delegation over to China on the 4th of January, came back and immediately put in the SARS task force to shut down and get everything. But there were some very interesting things. I think that what for me has been fascinating about everything being between Taiwan and Singapore in the last few months is, and then obviously at Spike Labs, we're headquartered in Korea, so we have like 240 companies across Asia. So it's just watching how Asia has reacted to this and handled this differently to the West. And there's three things that really happened, right? One, of course, is that it took everyone ages in the West to realize why everyone in Asia was wearing a mask. We're wearing a mask to stop the spread. While in the US, it was very individualistic. And in the UK, it was all about, no, masks don't stop the spread. Though I can catch you without a mask. Because that wasn't the point. It's to stop the spread. And that took a long time for people in the West to realize that. And then secondly, was the very comprehensive education that goes into play. I mean, everywhere around Asia, there was this immediately, wear masks, wash hands, etc. And, I know the UK and US government comes in for a lot of flack, but I do feel sorry for them because half the UK and US population just don't listen to whatever the government tells them. So, while in Asia, they do. And there is a general trust for a government, even in a democracy where, Taiwan and Korea are pretty vibrant democracies against what you might see in China. So I think that was very interesting. And then I think the third thing was, of course, in the West that everyone's forgotten how to make things. And so everyone's scrambling around figuring out how to make masks, and something as simple as that couldn't be figured out very fast. So I think it's exposed some very interesting dynamics between East and West. Asia is recovering rapidly. It hasn't had to do massive bailouts, and it's to be honest, is in quite a good shape for going forward, in particularly China. But as I was saying beforehand, for me, the fascinating thing is the incredible change that's happening in China more than anything else. There's three things that happen in China that's very interesting. One, a huge focus on sustainability and cleanup of the environment. Two, supply chain. China recognizes the rest of the world's pretty pissed off and has to be even more self-reliant than in the future. And that has led to something that's even more interesting, which is food. So there has been an incredibly rapid rise in the last few months of artificial food. So here in China, there is a company called Genro, which is about 6 months old. And their artificial meat is as good as Beyond Meat. It's not as good as Impossible Burger yet, but it's as good as Beyond. And in a year's time, it's probably as good as Impossible. So China is now becoming even more self-reliant than the future, which is a bit of a worry, but a very interesting dynamic. So things are changing so rapidly here. It's incredible.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. The level of innovation in Asia and China, particularly coming out of that, is quite amazing. All right, with that, we had a few questions mailed in that I want to make sure that we address those, since I'm sure a lot of you on the call are waiting for answers. So I'll just pick what I think is the most appropriate panelist to address them individually. So the first one I want to go to Jerry, because one thing that's on top of everybody's mind is of course layoffs, right? Like we see like big tech companies doing layoffs like almost every other day. You see like Lyft, Uber, Airbnb laying off people. So one of the audience members asked, what is the best approach to do this? Is it like direct cuts for projects that have failed? Is it a general cut for all employees? Is it cutting salaries, cutting like people? I think it's like a lot of people are entrepreneurs and they're struggling with this question. What would be your guidance to like dealing with this hard problem, Jerry?
It is a hard problem. So the pure tech companies that make technology and sell it, there are actually fewer layoffs. Still some, but at a lower level because the employees can work from home. The demand drop hasn't been seen in full yet, although it's coming. So salaried employees who can work from home are generally in decent condition. Companies like Uber, Lyft, they're not really tech companies, they're consumer companies, and they depend on consumer demand. They're consumer companies that happen to use technology in the delivery of their consumer product. And so that's a tough spot to be in because you can only staff your company against the demand from the consumers. But demand is down, you can't unfortunately have the staff taking salary when there's no business to support, to make the payroll, right? And so, and the choice you make in dealing with this tends to be very specific to the circumstances of each company. For myself, I never liked the idea of general cuts. You try to look at, generally you should have a demand model, you should have a revenue model, and then you should have a model of percentage of your business in development, percentage of your business in sales and marketing, percentage of your business in G&A. And where one of those areas is off their model, given to a drop in demand, then you adjust that area. You don't cut developers because you have too many lawyers in the accounting department, because there's no contracts for the lawyers to read, but the development of the next product still has to go on. You don't, if sales have dropped through the floor and 70% of your salespeople are selling below quota, then you have to make an adjustment in the sales department. I tend to not like the salary cut thing. You can use that for the short term, but it tends to make people angry. And my general approach has been, rather than cut the salary of 100 people to save 10 jobs, I'd rather, and then have 100 unhappy people. I always think it's better to take the hard step of reducing those 10 jobs and then have 90 people receiving their full pay. And so I have 90 happy people instead of 100 unhappy people. So that's the approach I like to take in general.
Excellent advice for our founders in the audience. The next question I want to address to Newton. So health tech has been traditionally a very tough space, right? Like very long going to market times. So have you seen the mindset in the healthcare system change due to COVID? Do you think this is only for COVID treatment or does this go beyond? And what's your go-to-market strategy?
So our kit is designed so that it's software driven. Depending on the viral load that we're detecting, we can change the actual software load and repurpose the device. The cartridge itself is a single use specific to the antigens that we're detecting. Market-wise, I found that the market is acceptable to try newer things faster, which is not, wasn't the case before. FDA, for example, have eased a lot of the restriction and made the timing for their validation a lot more reasonable and manageable, as far as from the perspective of go-to-market. Our strategy is very simple, is to produce the super good product that solve for the problem, which is in-home testing and rapid, true rapid, not take a swab and mail it and get the result, or patch processing or any of that, and take it to the customer and let the customer advocate for themselves. We currently in FDA pre-approval process, so that's been quite fast for and remarkably fast for what we see in when we try to do the brain implant technology.
Awesome. Jerry, since you're also addressing a digital health solution, what's your experience bringing your new product to market been?
Well, we just received our prototype devices from China on Monday of this week. So we're going to do the original alpha trials. We think our plan will work, but you don't really know until you actually do the trial. So we've been working by word of mouth. Our whole staff is working without salary because we see this as a benefit to the global population, and would like to get out very quickly. But in just 1 week, we've already signed both the Mayo Clinic, which is very famous, and also Stanford University to be the early adopters and alpha testers for our product. So we're very excited about that.
Sounds like you have accelerated something that normally would have not been possible if it weren't for COVID.
That's exactly right. Everyone jumped in. Everyone was cooperative. We formed the company. We incorporated. We got 3 patent filings on file already because it's our concept actually is quite simple once you think about it. But it's important to protect the technology. Nonetheless, we want to spread it as quickly as we can. And I think really the pacing item for us will be the manufacturing. Our devices are being made in China, which is the great workhorse of the world. But we're going to need millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of these devices.
Awesome. Frank, so the next question I think is perfectly tailored to your experience. So one of the audience members asked is what is your advice for fundraising? When you're getting close to profitability, would you in this times and age still focus on fundraising? Would you just try to make your company sustainable? What would be your general guidelines for fundraising during COVID times?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question and a very relevant one. I mean, if we look at the last 2 downturns of 2000 and 2008, so investors tend to do 2 things in those downturns. One, they hold and invest in big companies that are either profitable or just have enormous scale. So, Amazon went through 2000, and okay, they had a tough time, but they still went through it. And even Google, which was founded obviously beforehand, but they went through it and came out the other side. And then the other thing they do is invest in new things. And of course, Facebook and the whole rise of social came after the 2000 crash, and Facebook 2003, and off it went. And then 2008, same thing, right? So Facebook's now massive, lots of investment for that. But new things like the stuff that I was involved in, both Siri and Spotify, came out at that time, right? So they tend to do very big things or very new things, and things that unfortunately, like that question, which is maybe close to profitability but not there yet, it's really, really difficult to get investment. The other thing you have to realize is that LPs at this time, there will be a flight of money from venture back to public markets. So LPs will be pulling money out of VC, are pulling money, and will absolutely pull money out of venture very, very rapidly, and push it back into public markets and things that are safer. So you have to realize that the investors you're talking to are worried about being cash constrained themselves. While they may have cash, they're not going to be, it's not going to be an easy time to raise money as an investor in the near future. So I think at this time you have to really you've got to tighten and be very, very tight and think about somehow achieving profitability or just holding in there. I would also, if you can get bridge loans from existing investors, take them, because we don't know where this is going at the moment. And if existing investors want to help even if I mean, hopefully the terms aren't ridiculous and some VCs are doing it, but try and get a bridge, try and sustain yourself, because going out and trying to find new capital right now is going to be very difficult in that situation. If you're a new company and that you are taking advantage of the whole new shape of the world, and you are turned up for COVID, like what Jerry's doing, that's a very different game. So that is something that you can definitely potentially go for, but not the way you were. Yeah, I think the one who was asking will have to tighten.
Yeah, no, I do think there's been a lot of memos from investors going out that it's time for belt tightening for startups again. So I definitely do see that. All right, and I have like one more question that was like pre-mailed in, and then we will go and allow also for people from this call to ask questions in real time, because we have a lot of amazing people on this call. So I'm sure there will be a lot of good discussion. So one question that was asked is, how will the world of communication change, and will be people open to adapt new methods? So I don't know if any of you has a particularly strong perspective. Otherwise, I would say maybe there's, Jerry, something that like you might have a perspective as a like high level vantage point. How do you think communication in this new world is going to change, and what kind of new things will get adopted?
I think I started using Zoom an awful lot. So there's been so many advances, products like Slack, Zoom, collaboration tools. I think Microsoft has some. I think the adoption and use of those will accelerate dramatically. There may be some new things coming along as well, but there's already a pretty good inventory of different digital online communication tools where you don't have to be face-to-face with an infected person who may make you sick and die. So I think that the main impact for me has been, I've been on Zoom every day for the last 2 weeks. A month ago, I never used Zoom. So I think it's pretty dramatic, the adoption rate of the wide range of existing tools. And I think that will only accelerate. And in fact, I think there are people who won't want to go back to work in an office. And in fact, an office may be a dangerous place for the next 2 years until there's a vaccine and until there's more protocols for avoiding spreading this virus.
Yeah. What do you say about Zoom? Reminds me about last weekend's Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings, when like Warren Buffett was like quipping that said like, now even his partner like Charlie Munger discovered Zoom, and since then he's perfectly happy staying at home, and like before that he was like staying out of a lot of investments. Now he's even happy to get involved remotely because he discovered Zoom. So,
well, one unanticipated, now the U.S. Supreme Court is holding their deliberations by open telephone where the whole public can listen to it. This has never happened before, which is spectacular. And the funny thing is they were having the Supreme Court call yesterday, and each justice was on their own phone at home. And in the middle of the call, everyone on the call could hear a toilet flushing. So someone was sitting in the toilet while talking, making their argument to the Supreme Court. So be careful when you flush the toilet, sitting at home on a Zoom call.
That is a very good advice. I've been on a few calls where people have been in the toilet, unfortunately, including video. But anyway, that's for a different time of story to tell.
I would just add to that and just say one of the cool things has just been the ability to attend conferences and attend meetups and just to get to know and meet people far more than ever beforehand, because I'm not missing travel at all, and I spend my life on planes, and I'm not kind of missing it at all. So because it's actually so much easier now to just get in touch, like exactly like we're doing right now, and have a conference, get to know people, have a talk, go to the next one. Beforehand, I'd spend 14 hours on a plane to one conference, spend 2 days, go out. Now I can do like 5 or 6 a day. It's quite liberating.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I attended a Morgan Stanley software executive conference last week by Zoom, and it was interesting. And I did have to go in person, but then it got to a point that I found kind of boring and tedious, where basically Morgan Stanley was promoting themselves. So I was able to just leave the meeting and log off. If I'd been there in person, I would have had to sneak out the back. So
Yeah, you'd had to listen to Morgan Stanley boring us for you for a day. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just logged off and I was free.
I do
So
think a
true.
lot of us have experienced this liberating thing, and like the positive personal things, right? Like, I mean, I got to spend as much time with my wife as like never before, as was like spending like 50% of my time on like airplanes going around the world. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced the same thing. So it's been a blessing in disguise for sure. All right, let's go to the questions from the audience. And I think Flianta, you wanted to ask a question. I think you've been like the first one to posting out. So if who is organizing this can unmute her, and then you can like ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm a new data scientist. I've started working on projects, programming. I really like analyzing data. My question is whether newbies, if I could call them like this, like me, are advantaged on the startup market. I know that startups are now kind of tightening their belts, but I wonder if as a new data scientist, as a new programmer, is there any chance of joining startups?
I think you got to pick your sector and be smart about which sector you go for. So, you know,
Okay.
what I mean, you know,
Normally on IT. IT
well,
product
no, I mean,
analysis.
okay, well, I would say, yeah, okay. I mean, but I would definitely say, obviously, anything to do with cloud, what, you know, climate, it's just definitely anything to do with climate, health, security. You just pick a sector that is like key for the future,
Okay.
and it's going to get a lot of investment. But some others are not. So you just figure those out.
But do you think like I wonder if the job market at this time will be focused on more experienced or senior people, or they'll be very happy to take people that have changed their careers also?
Yeah, this is Jerry. So basically, the tech industry is a daily war for talent. So the whole industry depends on intellectual property, and you know, you represent intellectual property on the hoof, basically a human intellectual property. And there's always a demand for intellectual property, and it's a global demand. And you know, if you can show your value in development and IT, and even data analysis actually is very important now, because it's one of the keys to contact tracing for COVID-19 fighting. So there's a endless demand for engineering and technical talent that can produce the intellectual property that is the driver of the tech industry.
Thank you. And I totally agree with this, right? Like I mean, crisis is always an opportunity, especially for newcomers. If you have not a lot to lose, you have no family to feed, I think it's a great time to get into the market. All right, next question was from my friend Ovi, who is like a great entrepreneur and has been doing a lot of great startups in Cluj. So he asks about office rent. So what do you think in this new world? Have we like gone like fully remote, or should we keep renting an office?
How much money do you have? You know, I think you can. I think office rents are coming down because the economy will down. So you can get. I think there should be cheap office space becoming available. And my feeling is, in the early days, when you're first developing your product, your go-to-market, and actually developing the technology, there's a value in being close together as a team, because there's many challenges and difficulties in the startup world, and being close together, supporting each other, and then sharing ideas back and forth, particularly among the developers making the first product. There's value in that. So, you know, but again, if money is tight and you know, you haven't got the next round and you can avoid the rent, then do that. So it's sort of a situational, I would say. Yeah,
no, I think that's good advice. I love like. See, we have like so many awesome people. Robert, who started a co-working space in Cluj that is quite fantastic, said like use this as an opportunity to advertise going for the future of co-working. So we have a lot of opinionated people here. That's excellent. All right, so maybe the next one from Mika, for maybe for Frank. Where do you see the biggest, and for anybody else who wants to answer, where do you see the biggest opportunities in the next few years?
Well, health, security, and climate, I would say, are the really big ones. So, health for me, obviously is huge, just in terms of, I would say, yeah. So health, security, climate, sustainability. You might not see it now, but the big guys will just double down on this space in a big way, and also governments will as well. And the huge one for me is supply chain. So autonomous vehicles. No one's going to want their supply chains disrupted like this again. So beforehand, when governments may have been a little bit down on autonomous vehicles or trying to stop them or push them back because the impact on the population and putting people out of work, I don't think anyone's going to stop autonomous vehicles now. So automation and autonomous vehicles across the supply chain. Drones are going to come up there. You can, I have to say as well, military, because I think the virus exposed militaries in a very, very bad way, right? Suddenly all the aircraft carriers had to pull back to the shores on the US because, all the crews have caught the virus. So again, autonomous military drones, ships and everything are going to come into place. They're obviously military, supply chain, health, and security is the key things for me. I can't see anyone wanting to, that people anticipate this disruption again happening, and we'll try to minimize it. Supply chain for me is the big one.
Awesome. Newton, you have your prediction what's going to be big in the next few years?
I think things that has to do with well-beings, like what we eat. There's going to be some serious innovation in the nutrigenomics space to prevent the food risk, food security, or address food security. I think there's going to be some more looks into things that takes the communication to the next generation, where you'd have hologramic interaction and augmented reality and being put into place. So Zoom would be facelifted, if you will, from a small number of dimensions to an nth dimension of production, and having people as avatars, as actually outside of the system, and the things that we've been seeing in presentations and in conferences actually get implemented on a broader scale and gets wider acceptance. Virtual offices become truly that of a virtual office, with all the supply and the software layer on the top of it, and everything is in one place, accessible with an easy way of doing it, so that the novice data scientist can be all of a sudden an expert, and the one that knows nothing about data science can actually use it to successful level. Healthcare and individualized medicine all of a sudden it takes a front seat when you realize that measuring your oxygen level in the blood can determine whether you're life or death in a corner of a hospital that is not monitoring you real time because they didn't incorporate Bluetooth 5 or something that transmits that information real time. So we find that a lot of things that were taking back seat will just take front seat and get developed in an accelerated fashion.
Yeah, what you say resonates very well. And also something that reminds me of a call. Yesterday, I hosted a call for my team with one of your Oxford professor colleagues, and he had the point that every technology in its early stages goes to what is called a skeuomorphic phase, where we basically try to replicate what was before, like the next stage of evolution happened, right? Like early cars looked like horse carriages. And I think now our video conferences, we're trying to mimic real meetings but then we can go the next step and do like all kind of like hologramic and like all kinds of things that are not possible in the real world. So I'm actually also quite excited once we go past this like skeuomorphic replication phase to this next one. All right. So next question from our friend Zafir. He's with Turkish Airlines. So good to see you on that call as well. Do you think remote working may lead to inefficiency and reduced cohesion? And if you do, what actions need to be taken to increase the efficiency in remote working? Maybe Jerry, you have a perspective on this one.
It's a good question. I've never been a fan of remote working. I always came to work early and stayed late, and but it's the trend, and particularly in the cities where there's so much traffic congestion, where in Silicon Valley now it can take an hour to go 3 or 4 miles, and then in big cities where you have to get on a subway train when you can be infected with the virus in mass transit. So remote working is coming. It is a problem. I think it does reduce cohesion. So I think there will have to be occasional, maybe a day a week, everyone comes to an office or maybe to a rented space to talk. I think more of these Zoom type conference or whatever technology, video conferences, and then it's just a bigger onus on management where, managers will have to really be managers, maybe for the first time in their career, and not, rather than just off in their corner, lifting their head from time to time to look at their worker or their coworker. They have to actually up their game in being a manager of all their dispersed staff and colleagues who are working from home or working remotely. And I think that's going to be a challenge because people don't inherently have management skills, particularly the technology arena. A great coder becomes a supervisor, then becomes the vice president of development with 100 tech employees. Yet he knows nothing about management, doesn't like management. It isn't part of his personality, and there he is. And so that type of person will be very challenged in the new remote working environment. Well, he'll have to keep tabs on and motivate and inspire and just get work out of people who are at home, watching TV or doing the dishes.
Yeah, so can I just add something to that? Because I thought that was very, very interesting actually from Jerry. So I do think, we have a lot of companies who are doing remote working or have moved to remote working now. And it does, there are a couple of things I would add to that. I mean, one, I think that a lot of them are actually pretty okay with it. And a lot of them have set up cameras so that everything is on real time. They've just got, video is on all the time. People can just stop, talk to each other, come back again. You've got multi-party Zooms up and running and that are constantly open. So I do think actually that it's actually proceeding at a pretty rapid rate, and also that if you're not motivated at home or you're motivated at remote working to get stuff done, you're going to be cut and someone's going to take your place really, really quickly. So you might be motivated more in the future on remote working than you were in the past, because you better be or you're gone. So I actually think it's here to stay, and it's going to be pretty rapid to take place faster than we think. Certainly seeing it on the ground already.
All right, that is amazing, right? Like I think this is very empowering, but that means also we all need to pull our weight going forward in order to really be like effective. All right, so one last question, and then we will go to wrap things up. So what is your view on the future of education? Can we envision a future with schools moving online? Anybody wants to take that on?
The schools have been trying to move online for over 20 years now. And the whole concept of thinking that it would be an online solution comprehensive solution is probably flawed, because part of the schooling comes from the interaction between individuals and the interaction with objects in environments, like things like chemistry, physics, science in general, requires that presence into an environment that has rich object interaction. So it would be very difficult to replicate that completely in a virtual setting. That is not to say that there would, the circumstances are imposing an improvement over the status of existing technology or existing virtual education technology to force being able to do a lab experiments with multiple individuals where one in object space and interacting with the tools and material, and others are actual observers, and then replay that role. So you have like a play space that you go to, a physical play space that you go to, or perhaps a virtual, but you receive a kit that replicate that virtual play space into your own environment. But that's as with respect to the sciences. In social science, in history, economics, mathematics, these are different disciplines that have their own requirement for education.
Awesome. All right. I'm asking a final wrap-up question. Vlad is also going to open up a poll as we're all trying to figure out, is this useful for you? What would you like us to do in future sessions? So it would be fantastic if like all the participants take a second to reply to that while we're doing that. And oh, Vlad, I think you've like closed the poll already again. Anyway.
No, I have not. Maybe I can relaunch it.
Okay, anyway. So the one final question that I would have to each of you, what is one thing that you wish to happen in the future as a positive outcome out of COVID? We've like talked so much about like all the challenges that it brings. What is like the one thing that you think and hope that we will get as a positive outcome out of COVID? So maybe Jerry, you'll go first, and then I'll call the others.
My hope is the end of Donald Trump.
Then we can see that we're truly international with having Americans on the call. Okay, short and crisp. I like it. +1 from me on that one. Newton, what's your one wish coming out of that?
I think the whole experience is going to bring people closer together. It's going to remind us of things that are basics, like washing your hands and keeping your distance and being courteous and polite, and don't get agitated if you're sitting in a room by yourself for a long time and the next person that you see you vent out on. It's just going to bring some basics teachings that we have forgotten, and eventually these are all positive outcomes.
Yeah, it's true. We're all in this as one humanity, and we're all impacted. This is the first crisis that we have to grapple with, no matter if you've been in China and Europe, in the United States. Like, first time that we're literally everywhere impacted from the same thing. So I couldn't agree more with that. Frank, what's your one thing that you'd like to see out of this?
Well, I mean, it's actually in our brand. It's equilibrium. So I'd like to see balance in the planet. You know, beforehand, we had a planet in crisis that caused the virus in effect. And then in lockdown, we've had, clear skies and lions sleeping on the streets of South Africa and all that sort of stuff. So I'd like, now when we come back, I'd like to see better balance and a better climate and a far more sustainable future. So I actually think people might actually get it now, but I don't know. I hope so.
I hope so too. As we've seen one black swan event with the coronavirus, hopefully we can prepare better for the climate crisis with another black swan event. So I certainly hope you're right. Okay, guys, I think thank you so much, Jerry, Newton, Frank. This has been wonderful having us with you. As Frank said, since now this is much easier remotely, we hope we can like do this a few times in the future and come together in different groups to really discuss and engage in interesting topics like that. Thank you very much for all the audience. Really appreciate the engagement, the questions you sent beforehand, the engagement during the call. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope at some point in time I can see many of you also physically again in Cluj, and not only virtually, but hopefully until then we can stay friends digitally. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Philip, for hosting.
Thank you, guys.